Hi guys, I'm Anna from Cask and Quill. Welcome back to my channel. Today I have a few book recommendations for the Halloween season that are a little bit milder for those of us who just don't really like super scary books or movies or whatever. Or if you're just in a little bit of a lighter mood, or if you just really hate being terrified. But you kind of want to participate in the spookiness of the season. So I have a few different things to recommend. Just to give you some idea of where I'm coming from, I, as you may know, absolutely love Halloween, and I love kind of creepy, dark, spooky shit, but I also am a huge baby when it comes to watching like scary movies or reading scary books. Like, I just can't sleep after I see some of that stuff sometimes or read stuff. So I really would like to share with you some things that are kind of safe for people like me who really enjoy that kind of stuff but don't necessarily enjoy being super scared or have trouble sleeping afterward or anything like that. So I will, without further ado, share with you some of my recommendations for ways to kind of participate in the spookiness of the season, but not actually be like, afraid to get up and go to the bathroom in the middle of the night. So we will start with a really pretty mild one, which is Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. This book is creepy, gothic, spooky, really moody, and atmospheric, but it's not scary. So it's got some of that like spooky sort of vibe to it. Excuse me. But I would not say that it's scary or terrifying or anything like that. But it is kind of like a mysterious plot. And I think it would be perfect for anyone who's just really not into horror books, but still wants to kind of have something that's a little bit more mysterious or spooky. Also, isn't this cover so pretty? The like foil on the front. I just love it. I read this again about this time last year, so and I found it to be kind of perfect for this Halloween-y time. So check that out if you haven't. And next up, I have a couple of kind of shorter suggestions, like short story types that you're probably familiar with, but The Legend of Sleepy Hollow is a good one I would recommend. It is a little bit creepy, obviously, and if you've seen any adaptation of it or know the story, like, you get what's happening here. But the book itself is actually really richly detailed, and I really enjoy reading this. I try to read it like once every couple of years or so, just because it's pretty short and it's a fun one to read. But yeah, Sleepy Hollow, Washington Irving, check it out. He also wrote Rip Van Winkle, if you are familiar with that story at all. Not as scary or creepy, but check it out. It's also good. This time of year, I think, is pretty good for like mystery type books, especially if they have something a little bit spooky or creepy in them. My favorite one to reread this time of year is definitely The Hound of the Baskervilles. I love Sherlock, and I would think probably any Sherlock would be really good for, in terms of like a mystery anytime, but especially now. But The Hound of the Baskervilles is my favorite one, and it is definitely got some like creepy, spooky vibes, foggy moors. That always does it, I would also suggest, I don't have them here with me, but if you're into kind of more mystery or whatever, checking out maybe Agatha Christie, I would try for this time of year, And Then There Were None. Murder on the Orient Express is another good one, but it's less like creepy or whatever. So, but if you're into that, check it out. Okay, bear with me on this next one because I think you're gonna think, okay, I thought these weren't gonna be super scary. This one is a little bit scarier, but I think you might be able to handle it because I was able to. It is The Silence of the Lambs. I really, really liked this book. It's got some bits and pieces that are kind of creepy or scary or whatever, but I think you'll be able to handle it. It's really interesting to read, and like the Hannibal Lecter character obviously is just super smart and fun to learn about, I guess. So I would try it. You know, if you're feeling like, oh, I kind of feel like maybe I could read something that's a little scarier, I would try this and just see how you get on, because it's not that bad. It's not like I was able to sleep the day I finished this. So I think I read it in like a day or two. Also, it's a good one. Trust me on this. So now we'll move into one of my favorite genres, which is classic horror. So there are a lot of really good classic books that have horror elements to them that I think are not as scary as more contemporary horror books. The first one I'll mention is my very favorite book, and that is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. And this book is so good. I just want everybody to read it because I love it so much, and I just know how much that I have gotten out of it. You know, it's one of those books that I've read many, many times, and I've written some papers on it in school and stuff, and yet it's one of those that, like, every time I return to it, I have more to think about or more to kind of discover about it. Anyway, the story is really good. If you've never read it before, it's a lot more than the sort of image I'm sure that you have in your mind of it, of just the kind of, oh, there's a monster and oh my gosh. Anyway, there's a lot more to it than just kind of the horror aspect of it. And I think it's a really interesting sort of look at like many different things, but the idea of creators and their responsibility for their creations and things like that. So I would check this out. I can't say enough about it. And it's not, I wouldn't say it's scary. You know, it's a classic horror book, but it's not like terrifying or anything. So please do check this one out if you're interested. Along those same lines would be Dracula. This book I read for the first time this time last year, and I really liked it a lot. I knew I was going to. I was a little bit afraid to read it at first, you know, like I didn't really know like what to expect. I thought it was going to be a lot scarier than Frankenstein was, and I guess that's maybe true, that it was a little bit creepier. Actually, you know, I think I would put it on the same level as Frankenstein. So if you've read Frankenstein, I would suggest reading this one. I still like Frankenstein more, but this was a really good, like, classic read. And again, it has more to offer than just the sort of, you know, like, character that we're familiar with of Dracula. I would try this one out if you haven't yet. It's really good, and I think you'll probably like it. So, and it's not super scary, so you'll be good. Another one that I would recommend that's similar, or at least kind of in that same kind of classic horror type genre, I just read this one, The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. That's another good one that's a little bit creepy, kind of, you know, not super scary, but there's some elements of that, and a really good and interesting book, and I really enjoyed reading it as well. So I would check that one out. You'll definitely be able to handle that one. Lastly, we'll move on to the sort of short story, classic horror type stuff. First and foremost, I will suggest H.P. Lovecraft. I shouldn't say foremost, because the next one is foremost. But first, I will suggest H.P. Lovecraft. I think that these are not super scary. there are like scary-ish bits or horror type bits or suspenseful bits, but I wouldn't say it's super scary. I think you'll be able to handle this if you can kind of, if you've been able to read any of the things that I've mentioned so far, I think you'll be fine with this. I would suggest maybe start with The Shadow over Innsmouth. That's a good one. I just reread that this weekend or last weekend and enjoyed it just as much this time. Another one, obviously like The Call of Cthulhu or Cthulhu, however you say it. I say Cthulhu, by the way, but that's mostly because of the Metallica song. It's creepy. It's got like some good sort of like gothic, southern gothic type vibes to it, I think, in that one. But I would try it out. If you haven't ever tried Lovecraft out, maybe start with that one just because it's kind of the most well-known, obviously. It's not too long either, so if you hate it, whatever, it wasn't a big waste of time. So just try it out, and I would be interested to hear what you think of it if you do try it. Or if you've already read it and liked it or didn't like it, let me know. Okay, now we're coming to foremost. I think this should probably be pretty obvious by now, but my boy, Poe. I mean, what do you even say about this? If you have never read Poe before somehow, please pick up a copy of one of his complete books, or all of his stuff is in public domain, so it's available for free online if you just look it up. There's so much great stuff in here. There's a lot that isn't that great as well, but just flip open to a page or read one that you've heard of before, and give it a try. I would say probably like the most well-known is obviously The Raven, which is actually a poem, not a story. That's, start there. Why not? It's short and sweet. Get to it. Some of the kind of more awful ones, they're not like awful, but some of the ones that are a little bit more intense would be The Black Cat and The Telltale Heart. Those aren't necessarily my favorites. I do enjoy them, but they are a little bit whatever. My top favorites are The Cask of Amontillado and The Mask of the Red Death. So both of those are not super scary. They're just creepy, and they have like a good like finish to them, I think. Those are my favorites of his, and he's one of my favorite authors, actually. Actually, fun fact, if you didn't know already, the name Cask and Quill is partially inspired by the Cask of Amontillado. So there's that for you. But I would also encourage you to read The Fall of the House of Usher. The Pit and the Pendulum is another really good, classic, well-known one. There's just so many. So I would say just kind of start, and if you are kind of liking that vibe, most of the stories are pretty short, so you can probably get a good number of them read if you are liking them. So I would just, start bopping around on the internet and see what you can find, or like I said, get a copy of one of these. Most of these are pretty inexpensive, and just see what you can find. If you are not so much into like the short creepy story, you might want to try from him The Murders in the Rue Morgue, which is a set of 3 different detective stories. So they're like mystery stories, and these are actually considered the first example of detective fiction in the English language. Interesting. These are really fun. They're good. They're not overly gross or creepy or anything, but they are kind of, Poe-ish, but very different from a lot of his other short stories because they do have kind of that detective element to it. So I would check these out if that sounds like something that you'd be interested in. So that concludes my list of suggested reading for those who don't really like to be scared a ton during Halloween or any other time. I think these are all books that you could probably handle. Just test them out. If it gets, beyond your comfort level, stop reading. I would be very interested to hear if you have any of your own suggestions of something to add to this list, something you think would kind of fall into that same category of kind of has some spooky or Halloween-y elements, but isn't super scary and isn't going to be too much for somebody who doesn't enjoy that, like the kind of more contemporary horror genre. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this video and found it helpful. Like I said, if you have read any of these books and kind of would agree or disagree, I'd be interested to hear about that in the comments. I also, like I said, would be interested in hearing about any suggestions you might have to add to this list. Thanks so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye! But still want to, get in the spirit of Halloween. No. Ooh, you gotta be quicker than that. Probably my favorite he also wrote he also wrote, too stupid. He write for kind of this, okay. Somebody's house is on fire.